Hey there, it's Marley. Welcome to my booktube channel. Today we're going to be discussing my October wrap up, so all the books I read in October. If you have not subscribed already, be sure to hit the button down below. And sorry in advance if you can tell that I have a sore throat right now. Hopefully that is not too annoying. All right, before we get into my book reviews, let's do a little overview of my month with the stats. So first of all, I read 8 books this month, which again is my average. I almost always read 8 books. My pages read was about 3,534. My average rating was 4 stars, so that's actually pretty good. Books acquired was 2, and Own Voices novel was only 1 this month. In terms of my genre, it's not really surprising that for October, aka Halloween, I mostly read horror books with 37.5%. Then fantasy and mystery books both came in at 25%. And then we had thriller books at 12.5%. Format, we had mostly physical books and a few ebooks. For audience level, we read mostly adult books and only 1 YA book this month. For author gender, we had 6 female authors and 2 male, which is a little bit more male than I normally have. For author status of whether I've read from them before or not, we had 5 authors I have read from before and only 3 that were new to me. And in terms of year published, we had 2 in 2023, 2 in 2022, and then we had a few more backlist books of 1 in 2019, 1 2017, 1 2014, and 1 1992. I think that's enough for the stats for now, so let's get into the book reviews. And as always, I'm going to discuss them from my lowest rated to my highest, so you'll want to stick around to see which books were 5 stars this month. We do have a couple of them. All right, so starting out with my lowest rated book, we did have The Troop by Nick Cutter, which is one of the horror books I read. I actually read this most recently over Halloween, and I ended up giving this only a 2.5 star rating out of 5. I have been hearing about this book on BookTube for a couple years now, and I was sort of interested in it, but it is the type of book I haven't really read before, where it's like a horror that I think might be extreme horror, or like it's more of a gruesome horror book, but my boyfriend ended up buying it. So it's from his bookshelf and he read it. He didn't really like it, but he's like, you know, why don't you read it so we can talk about it? So I did. Clearly I was not the biggest fan. As I said in my Goodreads review, like I like to read for fun, and I think this type of book is just not really fun for me. If you don't know the premise, I guess it's kind of based on Lord of the Flies, which I haven't read that book. I think I would have had a better time reading that one. But we're following a scout troop of boys. So we have the scout leader and then these like 4 or 5 boys who go to this island in PEI, actually, in Canada, which is where I'm from, so that's fun. That's where the fun ends. No, so they're there on like a little retreat into the woods, you know, as little scouts do. We see that this man shows up on the island with them and he's acting really weird. He has some sort of infection, and I haven't really seen people discuss like what type of infection he has, so I guess I won't spoil that either. But then it starts like infecting the rest of the troop, and it's basically these boys, they're like 14, them trying to survive with this kind of monstrous thing that's happening, as well as just trying to survive their own like dynamics, as there's kind of like an evil character as well. For most of this book, I just felt like it was very predictable what was going to happen, right? Like people are getting infected, people are all going to die kind of thing. And I didn't really care about the characters that much either. I thought they were pretty unlikable. By the end, I will say I did grow to like some of the characters and some of the relationships that were built and like the friendships. So it probably would have been like a 3-star read. Like not my favorite, but you know, not that bad. Then there was just a couple scenes that really made me uncomfortable, and maybe that is just, you know, a personal thing, personal limit, but some scenes just did not sit well with me. Specifically one, which I'm gonna do a trigger warning for, like violence against animals and that kind of topic. I just did not like that, and I've heard that Nick Cutter has that type of content in all his books, and I'm not about that. I'm not about that, and I had to like lower it down a little bit more just because of that. So I think moving forward, I'm not going to seek out books that are like this. I think I just don't enjoy them. So this did come in as my worst book of the month, but I am glad that other people have liked it. Next up, we had a 3-star read, and that was the newest Grady Hendrix book, How to Sell a Haunted House. So this is another horror. And I guess the only other book that was by a man. So they both came in at the bottom of my list. So this is about a woman, and she's like in her 30s or something, I think. She finds out that her parents have died. So she goes back to where she's from, her hometown, her childhood house that she grew up in, to sort of settle and obviously figure things out with her parents' death, do the funeral and all that, with her brother, who she really does not get along with. They're pretty estranged. They've never gotten along throughout their whole lives, and they're kind of forced to like figure out what to do with the house, deal with the will. There's a lot of tension between them. During that, we're also seeing that this house seems to be haunted. Specifically, there are these like creepy dolls and puppets because their mom was like a puppeteer and would make these puppets. That is honestly the main thing. Like I've heard people talk about like creepy dolls with this book, but I didn't realize that was like the main focus of this book. There were definitely parts of this that I liked, specifically the sibling relationship. I liked that as we developed it more and more, but for some reason, like I started to get in a slump while reading this book. That's my oven, 1 second. Okay, we're back. Yeah, I don't know if it's the book's fault or something else, but I was just getting very slumpy while reading this book, and that does not often happen to me. I felt like it was really dragging, and there were some points where I was just like very bored. It just seemed so long. There are some like crazy action scenes and like violence, but even those scenes, it was almost like I was skimming them because they were going so long, which can sometimes happen with like smutty scenes. I don't know if you guys ever have that where like if those scenes are like too repetitive or like there's too many of them, you just kind of start skimming. That's kind of what was happening with this too, where I'm like, okay, like they're taking a lot of damage, like a lot's happening, but I was just kind of like ready for it to be done. And I don't know, Grady Hendrix is so cool. He writes some interesting, unique, creepy stories, but this was not one of my favorites from him. And again, I don't know if it was just me and like my mood. There were parts I definitely liked, but there were parts that were like so slow and just kept dragging on. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for everyone. Next up, I read The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is a modern classic, I would say. And this is one of the books I read in my Dark Academia reading blog, which I'll definitely link up above and in my description in case you didn't check it out yet. But I actually had such a fun time filming that blog, so I would recommend it. Secret History is kind of like the staple when it comes to Dark Academia, and I can see why, because I actually did quite enjoy it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. So we're following this guy who goes to this college, and then he ends up getting into this very kind of prestigious closed off group that studies the Greek language. There's only like, I think there's 4 or 5 students and then the professor that are in these classes, and he gets allowed in, and we're really just exploring like his life and his experience at the school and interacting with this group of friends, and they're all like pretty terrible people as you come to find out throughout the book. And basically we know going in that one of them is going to die or get murdered, and so we're kind of leading up to that. It is quite like slow paced. It's a very long book. I read the ebook and it was over 400 pages, but that was with me making the text very small. I think maybe if it was like a printed edition, it might be over like 600 pages depending on the edition. So it's a long book, but honestly, if this kind of idea intrigues you and if you're into Dark Academia, I actually would recommend it. I think by the end, I was like, okay, this was honestly worth it, and it explored quite a few different interesting themes. You just got to know these characters really, really well, being with them for so long. But this is another book I don't think would be for everyone. So if you don't like slow-paced books and like morally gray characters or like bad characters, then this wouldn't be for you. But yeah, check out my blog for like even more in-depth thoughts. But it was a 4-star. Another book in that vlog, and it's pretty similar actually, is If We Were Liars by M.L. Rio, another Dark Academia, and the plot starts out pretty similar to The Secret History. I kept comparing them in that video, but again, we're following a main character going to college. It is actually like an arts college. They're specializing in drama, and he has this very small friend group or group of classmates, and it's very like competitive between them, right? They all kind of want to be the star, and as the description says, it's like they're playing heroes and villains in the plays, and they're also playing them like in real life as well. This one definitely focuses more on like the relationships between the characters. There's more of them to start with too, so there's a lot more like romance and different relationship stuff like that. But in this one, there also is another murder that we are exploring. So for the first couple acts, oh, I should also say this is definitely focused on Shakespeare plays a lot. If you are like an English nerd or a Shakespeare nerd, I mean, you've probably already read this book, but if you haven't, then you definitely like it. These characters are constantly quoting Shakespeare. It's pretty funny. But yeah, the story is also told in acts, similar to a Shakespeare play. So for the first couple, you're wondering like which character is gonna die, and then the second half is kind of the fallout of that death and seeing how the characters react and the audience figuring out like who killed them or like how they died. The ending is a shocker. It really affected me and made me cry and made me run to the internet to like look up what people say about it, look up theories. That's really what made me have a higher rating for it. I could see this again being too slow and too boring for some people. I think in the very middle it was a little boring for me, but I did give it 4 stars. I do overall recommend it. I'm glad I own this. It is quite a beautiful book. I had a fun time with it. Sorry if my camera keeps shifting. My tripod is like giving me issues. Another 4-star I had, which honestly 4-star, 4.5, like just highly rated, is The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. So I've read a few contemporary books from her, and this is my first like horror fantasy that I've read from her. It is a retelling of Carrie by Stephen King, which is the only Stephen King book I have read. So I was definitely interested to read this and kind of compare and see what she did with this. If you don't know, we're following our main character, Maddie, and in the typical Carrie style, she has been sort of isolated by her parent. It's her father in this case, and he's very religious, very protective of her, and because of that, she hasn't really had a lot of interactions with like her peers and stuff, so she's a bit of an outcast. People think she's weird. Basically, Maddie is half black. Her mother was black, but she is white passing, and her dad forces her to pretend to be white. They straighten her hair, they like burn it straight, and so she's not allowed to go to school when it's raining. She can't get it wet in front of people or else they will see how her hair curls up and know that she's black. So this one day it rains unexpectedly at school, and her classmates see her hair kind of puff up and start making fun of her because they realize that she actually is black. There are other black students at this school, but it's kind of an old-fashioned school where there's even still segregated proms, so there's still a lot of racism in this town, and so she's just getting bullied, blah blah blah. I feel like I'm going so in depth with this plot. Sorry. Basically, I mean, you can imagine the trajectory that it takes if you know Carrie. I was a little worried because I didn't love Carrie, and one of the things I didn't love is how the story was told with those newspapers and essays and things where it kind of spoils what happens later, which is obviously like Carrie going crazy and killing people. It did the same in this, but I wasn't as bothered by it. I obviously liked this more than I liked Carrie. I feel like it dealt with those similar themes, but then added so much more with that race element. I feel like it was just so impactful, and she did so much with it. While there were times I was like, maybe I'm a little bit bored, like by the end I was like, wow, this is really good. I liked the ending and little things that she added to it. There is kind of like a little romance that's sweet. Tiffany D. Jackson's writing is just always good. Like, she never misses. So I did overall enjoy this and recommend it. Another great book I had this month was Everyone Here Is Lying by Shari Lapena. This is one of my favorite thriller authors, so I was excited to read this, and as always, I read this in one night. I don't know what magic Shari Lapena has that when I start reading her books, I can't put them down the whole night. I need to do a 24-hour reading blog where I read her next release because I know I could read it in that time. I do start out with a very basic premise for Shari Lapena and like a lot of domestic thrillers, where we're following this family and there's tensions within the family. We know that the husband is cheating on the wife, and we see that and we see who it's with. And then he comes home one day and his daughter is there, and they have kind of like this confrontation. And then next thing we know is that this daughter is missing. We just dive into like, where did this daughter go? You know, did the dad do it? What's going on with this family? And we're also getting to know all these neighbors as well. Again, classic Shari Lapena, involving all the neighbors. There's affairs, there's secrets and lies and all this. She does an interesting twist in this one, but I feel like it wasn't, I don't know. A lot of her books I enjoy so much and I read them so quick, but I'm like, it's not 5 stars. There's just something missing. So that's why I did 4.5. But the fact that I can read her books so quick, I'm like, that's talent. Like, I have to rate this high. I think if you just want like a really fun, quick, easy to read thriller, this is for you. All of her books are for you. Unfortunately, I got like a minor spoiler from another booktuber about this, so I'm not going to say what she said because I kind of view it as a spoiler. I think it's very fun and I would recommend overall. Now, all we have are my 5-star reads. I actually read these back to back, which is really fun because I feel like I rarely have a full 5-star read, especially not back to back. So first up we have Cassandra Clare's new book, Sword Catcher, and I actually did a whole reading vlog for this, so I'll also link that below if you want to see me literally reading it in real time and all my thoughts. It is non-spoilery. So this is her first adult fantasy book. We're in this kind of like medieval world, I guess it would be. We're following our main character Kel, who is an orphan, and he gets chosen to be the prince's sword catcher. So basically that's like the prince's protector, and he'll pretend to be the prince during certain events where they think the prince might be at stake. And with that, he gets to, you know, live in the kingdom, and he's best friends with the prince throughout their lives. But obviously there's a weird power imbalance where like his job is literally just to die for the prince. This world also has magic, but this big event happened that kind of like banned or got rid of all magic except for these certain people. And so our other main character is one of these people, Lynn. So she still has powers and she's trying to be a healer. Her best friend is sick, like chronically ill, and she's trying to heal her. Their paths eventually meet. It's basically just a lot about like the different politics in this world. The first 100 to 200 pages were a lot for me. It's a lot of info dumping and stuff to wrap your head around. So definitely be prepared for that. This is definitely for fantasy readers or high fantasy readers. But the rest of the book I just absolutely loved. There's even more characters than what I just said. We learn more about the magic and the power struggle between there's these different families. There's obviously romance that I was actually quite invested in. You know, Cassandra Clare, she always has those good romances. I just had to give it 5 stars by the end. There's action, there's cliffhangers at the end. I think it's very different from her Shadowhunter books. So if you didn't like her Shadowhunter books or you never read them, I would consider reading this one, especially if you're into that like political intrigue, like Regency fantasy. I think it's just gonna keep getting better and better and more epic. So loved it. And last book to talk about, and what I would say was probably my favorite book this month, is A Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Didn't expect it, honestly. This is another adult thriller, and this was the 3rd book I read for that Dark Academia vlog, and it's gonna be a series. So we're following Alex Stern, and she can see ghosts. So her whole life has been pretty traumatic because these ghosts have kind of like taunted her and tormented her. And obviously she feels like an outcast because no one else can see them but her. So it's led her to this life of like doing drugs and getting into trouble. Because of her power, she does end up getting recruited to Yale and being a part of their secret societies. So all of their secret societies have these different powers, and she gets recruited to the 9th secret society, the 9th house, which is basically to help these secret societies, keep them hidden, keep them safe, also keep them in line so they're not abusing their magic. This one also had quite a bit of, not info dumping, but it was a lot to learn, and it was a lot to wrap my head around at first. But again, like the vibes, the characters, the plot, Alex has this mentor and he goes missing. So we have that kind of mystery there, but then we have another mystery where it's a murder mystery. Like a girl has been killed and Alex starts investigating because she thinks one or multiple of these secret societies are involved. We love a murder mystery in this house, and there's also like potential romances going on. It just was such an interesting book once you wrap your head around everything. And I'm so excited to keep going. This book is pretty divisive. There's some people who really didn't like it. So I guess it's really just dependent on your tastes. But I'm someone that was totally in. I recommend it to people who like witchy, magical, dark stuff. There's definitely a lot of dark and disturbing stuff in this book too, just to be aware of. I mean, I know I'm just preaching to the choir here. Most people have read this book already, but I'm just glad to be joining in on the hype and can't wait to get to Hellbent. I will, of course, let you know when I get to the sequel, but this is a fave. This is definitely one of my favorite books of the year. So that was my October wrap up. I think it was pretty good. We read some dark, mysterious, horrific books this month, so I feel good about it. Had some 5-star reads, so can't complain. Definitely let me know below how your October reading went, and especially if you've read any of these books too, let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. See you next time. Bye.